So 12 miles off the coast of Scotland, right? You're 400 feet below the surface of the North Sea, and it is violently churning freezing cold water. But down there is a thriving, brightly colored coral reef.
Yeah, it's quite a scene.
It really is. I mean, it is teeming with life. You've got everything from these massive clusters of orange starfish to, predatory deepwater crabs.
Right.
But the craziest part of this ecosystem isn't just that it exists in such a hostile, dark environment. It's that this entire reef is attached to a floating industrial steel skyscraper.
Yeah, it's a ticker.
It totally is. So today we are doing a deep dive into how a massive piece of renewable energy engineering just accidentally became a biodiversity hotspot.
Exactly.
We're pulling from two main sources for this. We've got a highly detailed 2026 article from EcoPortal by Kelly Lipke and the foundational 2022 scientific study by Carlson and their team, which was published in Wind Energy Science.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So the location you were describing, it's Equinor's Hywind Scotland Pilot Park.
Okay.
And it is this fascinating convergence of two completely different fields. You have heavy offshore engineering on one side, and then marine benthic ecology on the other.
Wow, quite a mix.
It really is. And the Carlson study in particular serves as this critical baseline, mainly because it started as something entirely mundane.
Oh, really? It wasn't a biology mission to start with?
No, not at all. The energy researchers, they just needed to inspect the structural integrity of their hardware. So they sent a remote-controlled robotic submersible, an ROV, down into the water.
Just a standard checkup.
Exactly. They were looking for, metal fatigue, rust, maybe tension issues on the mooring cables. But instead, they ended up logging this massive biological data set.
That's amazing. But I guess before we get into the biology of what that robot actually found on the cameras, we really need to establish why there are, floating skyscrapers out in the middle of the North Sea to begin with.
Yeah, context is important here.
Right. Because the Lipke article notes that the offshore wind industry is being pushed further and further from the coast. Like if you think about the ocean environment before these turbines, it's basically a featureless sandy desert, right? Just a blank canvas with no cover for marine life.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And the shallow continental shelves, where you can, easily drive a traditional turbine pylon straight into the seabed, those are getting incredibly crowded. We're simply running out of shallow water real estate to meet global energy demands.
Which is exactly what forces the engineering into deep water.
Right.
Because when you move into water that is 400, 500, or even 1,000 feet deep, the traditional monopile design where you essentially just hammer a massive steel tube into the bedrock, that's no longer physically or economically viable. You have to pivot to floating architecture.
Floating? How does a skyscraper float and not just, tip over?
Well, the Hywind site uses spar buoy technology. These are immense steel cylinders, and they're ballasted heavily at the bottom with water and rocks. So their center of mass is situated way, way below their center of buoyancy.
Oh, I see. Like a buoy.
Right, exactly like a buoy. That's what keeps the turbine upright. But, you still have to lock them in place. You can't exactly have a multi-thousand-ton turbine drifting into shipping lanes.
No, I imagine that would be a nightmare.
A huge liability.
So they're tethered to the seafloor, obviously. But the sources point out that drilling traditional anchors at that depth, especially in that pelagic sediment of the North Sea, is incredibly difficult.
No, incredibly.
So instead, the engineers use these things called suction caissons to lock the mooring lines into the sand.
Yeah, the suction caisson is just a brilliant workaround for deep water anchoring.
How does it work?
So you drop a massive open-bottom steel cylinder. It's essentially just a giant hollow tube onto the seabed. Its sheer immense weight drives it partially into the clay and sand.
Okay, so it sticks in a little bit just from gravity.
Right. But then ROVs attach these heavy-duty pumps to valves on the top of the cylinder, and they literally pump out the trapped seawater from inside.
Oh, wow. So by evacuating that internal water, they create this massive hydrostatic pressure differential.
Exactly.
So the internal pressure drops, and the staggering weight of the ocean above simply acts like a giant hydraulic press.
Yeah, that's it exactly. It just drives that steel cylinder deep into the seabed until it's permanently locked by the sheer strength of the surrounding soil.
That is wild.
And that is the exact mechanism. And what's great is it requires no heavy pile-driving equipment.
Which is noisy, right?
Right, notoriously loud and really disruptive to marine mammals. But here, you just let the ocean own hydrostatic pressure do the heavy lifting.
So clever.
Yeah. So you have these suction anchors locked in the mud, massive steel mooring chains rising 400 feet up through the water column, and the submerged spar buoys of the 5 turbines just bobbing at the surface.
And that is the bare industrial canvas that was dropped into the North Sea.
Right.
But smooth industrial seal doesn't just, spontaneously sprout a complex ecosystem.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Because if you drop a piece of metal into a sterile pool, it just rusts or degrades. There has to be a really specific biological mechanism that turns cold steel into a habitat. Wait, so the Carlson study notes that the biological takeover begins almost immediately, right? How fast are we talking, and how does a piece of smooth industrial steel suddenly become a habitat? Because that sequence of colonization seems, completely counterintuitive.
What's fascinating here is that it all comes down to the chemistry of the ocean.
Okay.
Because seawater isn't just salty water, it is a dense soup of organic molecules, bacteria, and microscopic larvae.
Right.
So within hours of that bare steel hitting the water column, it undergoes a process called biofouling, and it starts at a truly molecular level.
Molecules are attaching to the steel.
Yeah. Glycoproteins and polysaccharides that are just in the seawater, they adhere to the metal. They create what we call a conditioning film.
A conditioning film, okay.
Yeah. And this microscopic layer actually alters the surface tension and the chemical properties of the steel itself.
Oh, wow. So it essentially primes the canvas. Like the
Right.
steel is no longer just metal. It has this organic, sticky coating.
Exactly. And that conditioning film is basically the dinner bell, the signal for marine bacteria.
Okay.
They settle onto this film and begin excreting extracellular polymeric substances, essentially a protective slime.
Got it. Good old ocean slime.
Right, and this forms a biofilm. So now you have a living microscopic mat covering the entire underwater structure, and this happens in a matter of days.
Days. That is incredibly fast.
It is. And the critical leap occurs when that biofilm triggers the settlement of macrofaulers.
Right, the early colonizing species.
Yeah.
Because the ocean currents are constantly carrying the microscopic, free-floating larvae of, barnacles, tube worms, mussels.
Exactly.
And when those drifting larvae gump into the steel, they use specialized sensory organs to detect the chemical cues of that bacterial biofilm, right?
They do.
It basically tells them, hey, this is a stable surface. Attach here.
That's exactly it. They cement themselves to the steel and begin to grow. And once those hard-shelled organisms establish a foothold, well, the smooth topography of the steel is completely gone.
Oh, because now it's bumpy.
Right. The structure is now highly textured. It has cracks, crevices, three-dimensional complexity.
Yeah.
And that physical texture provides shelter for small grazing crustaceans, amphipods, smaller fish.
Which inevitably attracts the larger predators.
Exactly. The food web cascades upward incredibly rapidly.
Which brings us back to the robot. The data from the ROV inspection actually puts hard numbers on that cascade.
It does.
They surveyed 41 different underwater components across those 5 floating turbines. And the cameras identified exactly 121 distinct forms of sea life.
It's a staggering number.
It really is. But here's where it gets really interesting. The life isn't evenly distributed.
No, not at all.
Because the structure spans 400 vertical feet of the water column, it acts like a massive environmental gradient. So the depth dictates the temperature, the hydrostatic pressure, and the light penetration.
Which in turn completely dictates the biology.
Right. It's like a 40-story apartment building, right, where the demographics completely change every 10 floors based on the, sunlight amenities and the water temperature.
That is a perfect analogy. The verticality creates these highly distinct ecological zones. So we can basically divide this artificial reef into layers.
Okay, let's go layer by layer.
Let's start with the photic zone near the surface. So the top 50 to 100 feet. This area is defined by high sunlight penetration and intense wave action.
The penthouse.
The penthouse, exactly. Because photosynthesis is possible here, you see a dominance of fast-growing organisms and filter feeders that thrive in those high-velocity water currents.
And the imagery described from those upper mooring cables is just striking.
Yeah.
Like the metal is entirely obscured by these thick, plush mats of plumose sea anemones.
Yeah.
And heavily interspersed in those anemone mats are massive clusters of bright orange starfish and spiny sea urchins.
The plumose anemones are so highly specialized for this exact environment. I mean, they look like soft, feathery plants, but they are actually predatory animals.
Right, they sting.
Yeah, they rely on the intense surface currents to bring zooplankton right into their stinging tentacles, the nematocysts.
Oh, wow.
And by elevating themselves on this steel infrastructure, moving away from the slower moving water down at the seafloor, they get first access to all those nutrient-rich currents near the surface.
I got the prime real estate.
They absolutely did. And the starfish are there to prey on the mussels and barnacles that are also competing for that premium surface space.
Okay, so that's the vibrant, sunny penthouse. But as the ROV descends, following those anchor chains down, the environment changes radically.
Very quickly.
You cross the thermocline, the temperature plummets, and the sunlight just disappears.
It goes pitch black.
Yeah. You enter the aphotic zone, down by the suction anchors, the basement, and all those fast-growing photosynthetic, current-dependent species from the surface, they just completely vanish.
Right. The deep benthic ecosystem operates on entirely different rules.
What's living down there?
Down at the suction anchors, the ROV footage captured large brown crabs and squat lobsters.
Okay.
These are cold water benthic species. And for them, the massive steel architecture of the suction anchors provides critical structural complexity.
Like hiding spots.
Exactly. It provides scour protection and deep crevices. You have to remember, in an otherwise flat, featureless, sandy seabed, a giant steel anchor provides the ultimate tactical advantage.
So I see.
It's the perfect place to hide from larger predators or, to ambush passing prey.
So they're using it like a fortress.
Pretty much.
That's wild. The presence of the crabs and anemones is fascinating, but the researchers explicitly highlighted one specific discovery as the major biological breakthrough of the survey.
Yes, the crown jewel.
They found corals, specifically delicate soft corals, and potentially even deep-sea stony corals, growing directly on the skeel frames of the turbines in the deeper, darker waters.
Finding deep-water coral on a floating industrial structure has massive implications.
Because they're usually so fragile, right?
Right. I mean, unlike shallow-water tropical corals, which rely on symbiotic algae and need bright sunlight, cold-water corals like Desmophyllum pertusum, which used to be known as Lophelia, by the way, they live in complete darkness.
Wow.
So they rely entirely on capturing organic matter drifting down from above. But more importantly, as you said, corals are famously sensitive, slow-growing organisms.
Yeah.
They require highly stable conditions to lay down their calcium carbonate skeleton.
Which means the floating engineering is performing far better than just, staying upright.
Absolutely.
If the platform was constantly shuddering, vibrating violently, or undergoing massive torque from the ocean waves, a delicate coral polyp would never be able to maintain its anchor point, let alone build a whole skeletal structure.
Precisely. The fact that slow-growing corals have successfully colonized the lower sections of these turbines is a direct testament to the stability of the spar buoy and mooring design.
It's almost like a badge of honor for the engineers.
It really is.
Yeah.
It proves that this human infrastructure isn't just a temporary rest stop for tough, fast-growing weeds of the sea.
Yeah.
It's stable enough to host long-lived, highly sensitive foundational species. It acts as a permanent substrate.
Well, this biological success story, though, it kind of creates a severe conflict of interest when you look at it from the perspective of the engineers operating the wind farm.
Oh, yes. It's a huge headache for them.
Right. The marine biologists are thrilled with the 121 species.
Mm-hmm.
But to the energy operators, this phenomenon is categorized as marine growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it represents a massive compounding operational liability.
We have to view this through the lens of hydrodynamic loading.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, all that biological mass, the thick mats of anemones, the clusters of mussels, the heavy corals, it all adds tremendous physical weight to the floating structure.
Which I assume they didn't account for, or at least not to that extent.
Right, but actually, weight is the secondary problem. The primary issue is hydrodynamic drag.
Oh. Because the ocean currents are no longer flowing smoothly past a sleek steel cylinder.
Exactly. In fluid dynamics, the drag force exerted on an object by moving water is highly dependent on two factors:
Which are?
the cross-sectional area of the object and its surface roughness, what we call the drag coefficient.
Okay.
So when a steel mooring cable becomes heavily coated in this fluffy, highly textured layer of marine life, its effective diameter significantly increases. It literally takes up more space in the water.
Right.
Furthermore, the surface is no longer smooth, it is incredibly rough and irregular.
So it essentially turns a streamlined cable into an underwater sail.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
The moving water just catches on all that biological texture, which means the kinetic energy of the ocean currents transfers directly into the mooring lines, pulling much harder against those suction anchors in the seabed.
Exactly. This dramatically increases the engineering loads. If the structural tension exceeds the safety margins designed by the engineers, the mooring lines could fail.
And you lose the turbine.
You lose the turbine. Historically, the standard industry mitigation for marine growth has been highly aggressive cleaning.
Wait, if the biological growth gets too heavy, won't the energy companies just have to scrape it all off? I mean, if they clean their equipment to save the turbine, doesn't that destroy this sanctuary we just celebrated?
That is exactly the dilemma. They typically send ROVs equipped with high-pressure cavitation blasters to literally scour the steel clean.
Oh, man.
They strip away the entire ecosystem to return the infrastructure to its original, streamlined state.
Which instantly obliterates the 400-foot vertical reef we just analyzed.
In a matter of hours.
But wow. The operator's dilemma is striking. Ensuring the mechanical survival of a massive clean energy asset inherently requires the destruction of a thriving localized ecosystem.
It's quite the paradox.
But if we look at the Lipke article, it introduces a broader conservation dynamic that complicates this even further.
It does.
Because these offshore wind farms, simply by existing in the water, are acting as de facto marine protected areas, largely because of the threat they pose to commercial fishing.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, specifically regarding bottom trawling.
The dragnets.
Yes, bottom trawling is an industrial fishing method where massive, heavily weighted nets are dragged directly across the seafloor. They just scoop up benthic fish and crustaceans.
And they destroy everything in their path.
To keep the mouth of the net open, they use giant steel or wooden plates called otter boards. This method is notoriously destructive. It effectively clear-cuts the seabed.
Wow.
It destroys naturally occurring coral reefs, sponge gardens, complex benthic habitats, while generating massive amounts of indiscriminate bycatch.
But a commercial trawler cannot operate inside a floating wind farm.
No, not a chance.
Dragging a weighted net through a grid of submerged mooring cables and suction anchors is guaranteed disaster.
It's suicidal for the gear. If a trawler snags a multi-ton mooring line, they risk snapping their own cables, losing highly expensive gear, or even capsizing their vessel.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about the capsizing risk.
Yeah, and if they damage the turbine's infrastructure, the liability is astronomical. Millions of dollars.
So the fishing fleets give these offshore energy sites a very wide berth.
A very wide berth.
And the physical footprint of the wind farm naturally excludes the most destructive form of commercial fishing.
Yeah.
The space between the turbines becomes a sanctuary where the benthic environment is left completely undisturbed by human harvesting.
Exactly. This creates a really bizarre alliance of outcomes. Heavy industrial infrastructure, which conservationists typically oppose in untouched waters, is actually providing a highly effective physical shield for marine biodiversity.
So given that, maybe they won't scrape the turbines clean in the future, because the baseline data from the Carlson study essentially forces a shift in the engineering paradigm, right?
It definitely opens the door for one.
If operators now have hard data proving exactly how fast marine growth accumulates in the North Sea, and they understand the sanctuary effect of the site, aggressive ROV scraping doesn't have to be the default answer anymore.
Right, because future platforms can be designed from the outset with excess buoyancy reserves and thicker mooring lines.
They just build it stronger from day one.
Exactly. Specifically calculated to handle the hydrodynamic drag of a mature coral reef. They can engineer the biological load into the baseline safety margins.
That makes a lot of sense.
That is the long-term application of this research. But, the study also brings up a critical ecological caveat that has to be addressed before we broadly declare offshore wind farms to be the saviors of ocean biodiversity.
Yeah, what's the catch?
Well, the visual data of 121 species is undeniable, but it triggers the most fiercely debated question in marine spatial ecology: attraction versus production.
So what does this all mean? Like, are these turbines actually generating new biomass, or are they just acting as underwater magnets?
This is the crux of the issue.
Let's break that down.
The attraction hypothesis posits that artificial structures simply act as fish aggregating devices, or FADs.
FADs?
Yeah. The ocean is vast, and highly structured habitats are actually quite rare. So when you drop a massive steel reef into a flat, sandy desert, you immediately draw in fish, crabs, and predators for miles around.
Right.
The structure concentrates the existing local population into one highly visible, dense area.
So this is the restaurant effect.
The restaurant effect.
Yeah, like if you open a highly hyped new restaurant in a small town, you don't spontaneously generate new foodies, right? On opening night, it just drains all the other diners from the surrounding restaurants.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
The net number of people eating out hasn't changed. They are just geographically concentrated. So if the turbines are purely aggregators, we aren't actually increasing the carrying capacity of the ocean.
Exactly the concern. And it can actually be detrimental.
Wait, how?
If a wind farm just heavily concentrates existing fish populations, it might actually make them more vulnerable to predation or to fishing fleets operating right on the borders of the exclusion zone.
Oh, right. The fishermen just wait right outside the boundary.
Exactly. It creates an ecological trap.
Okay, so that's attraction. What about production?
The production hypothesis, on the other hand, argues that the introduction of the infrastructure fundamentally changes the carrying capacity of the environment.
It makes more life.
Right. By providing unprecedented shelter for juveniles and hard substrate for foundational species like corals and mussels, more larvae actually survive to adulthood than would have otherwise.
Because they have a place to hide and grow.
Exactly. The net biomass of the entire region increases because you have introduced a novel, highly productive nursery and feeding ground.
Well, finding the deep-sea corals heavily implies production, right? Considering they are physically growing and calcifying on the site, establishing a permanent reproducing foothold.
For benthic, sessile organisms like coral, yes, it's definitely production. But proving production for mobile species like fish and crabs, that's much harder.
How do you even prove that?
It requires highly complex, multi-year acoustic telemetry and stable isotope analysis to track where the animals are actually deriving their energy.
Oh, wow.
It is not something you can solve with a single ROV camera survey from one 5-turbine site.
Yeah, you need way more data over a much longer timeline.
Exactly. And while the debate over the vertical platforms continues, the offshore energy expansion is simultaneously pushing into an entirely different horizontal frontier on the seafloor.
You're talking about subsea power cables.
Subsea power cables.
Right, because generating the electricity out at sea is only half the battle. To transmit hundreds of megawatts of power from a floating array back to the mainland grid, you have to bury massive export cables directly into the seafloor.
And as the industry scales globally, we are talking about thousands of miles of high-voltage alternating current, or HVAC, and high-voltage direct current, HVDC, cables crisscrossing the benthic environment.
That's a massive footprint.
It is. And this introduces two localized physical alterations to the seabed: thermal radiation and electromagnetic fields, or EMF.
EMF. Okay, I know cables get hot, but EMF.
Yeah, even heavily shielded cables emit a certain amount of heat into the surrounding sediment. But the EMF is the primary biological unknown.
How so?
As power flows through the cable, it generates localized magnetic and induced electric fields in the surrounding seawater.
Oh, and that messes with certain animals.
Specifically, it's highly disruptive for elasmobranchs.
Elasmobranch.
Sharks, skates, and rays.
Oh, right, because they sense electricity.
Yes. These species possess highly specialized electroreceptive organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini.
I remember reading about those.
Yeah, they use them to detect the minute microvolt bioelectric fields generated by the muscle contractions of their prey hiding in the sand.
That's incredible. They can literally feel a heartbeat in the mud.
Exactly. And they also use the Earth's geomagnetic field for broad navigation during migrations.
So if you lay a high-voltage cable across their path.
The concern raised in the broader research is whether the EMF generated by these subsea cables acts as a sensory barrier.
A barrier.
Yeah. If a benthic ray is migrating across the seafloor and encounters a localized magnetic anomaly radiating from a buried high-voltage cable, does it cross the cable or does it turn around?
Wow.
Or even worse, does the EMF mask the biological signals of their prey, effectively blinding their hunting mechanisms in that corridor?
It fundamentally changes how we view the footprint of green energy. I mean, the impact isn't just the physical space the turbine occupies on the surface. It is this invisible, structural, and electromagnetic web extending across the seafloor.
It really is.
The next time a listener sees a headline pop up about a massive new offshore wind farm powering millions of homes, there's an entirely invisible, highly complex second story happening underwater.
A completely parallel narrative.
We are actively terraforming the deep sea, rapidly introducing novel ecosystems and electromagnetic variables into environments that have been untouched for millennia.
That's a very accurate way to summarize it. The Carlson study really forces us to look closely at those unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, a routine industrial maintenance check on 5 Scottish wind turbines provided irrefutable proof that the ocean will rapidly colonize human infrastructure.
Faster than we ever thought.
The discovery of 121 species, the stratification of life into specialized layers from the surface to the seafloor, and the delicate, slow-growing corals clinging to the suction anchors. It all demonstrates that heavy engineering and biological conservation can, sometimes accidentally, overlap in profound ways.
Which leads to a final thought worth considering before we wrap up.
Okay.
If we now have high-definition proof that dropping bare steel into the deep ocean acts as an irresistible canvas for 121 forms of life, including highly sensitive, slow-growing corals, maybe the industry shouldn't view marine growth strictly as an engineering load to be mitigated.
Right. Change the perspective.
Exactly. If the engineering margins can support the weight, what if future offshore infrastructure is intentionally designed using biomimicry?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
By engineering specific surface textures, varied crevices, and targeted materials designed exclusively to cultivate coral recruitment, the massive offshore energy grids of our future could simultaneously serve as the primary tool we use to restore the ocean's fading biodiversity.
That would be an incredible dual-purpose design.
It would. Thank you for taking this deep dive into the source material. So 12 miles off the coast of Scotland, right? You're 400 feet below the surface of the North Sea, and it is violently churning freezing cold water. But down there is a thriving, brightly colored coral reef.
Yeah, it's quite a scene.
It really is. I mean, it is teeming with life. You've got everything from these massive clusters of orange starfish to, predatory deepwater crabs.
Right.
But the craziest part of this ecosystem isn't just that it exists in such a hostile, dark environment. It's that this entire reef is attached to a floating industrial steel skyscraper.
Yeah, it's a ticker.
It totally is. So today we're doing a deep dive into how a massive piece of renewable energy engineering just accidentally became a biodiversity hotspot.
Exactly.
We're pulling from 2 main sources for this. We've got a highly detailed 2026 article from EcoPortal by Kelly Lipke and the